Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the John Campea Show here on my YouTube channel. I am, of course, your host, John Campea, and it is an honor and a privilege, as it is every day, to have you guys joining with me here today. We got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about today on all of our favorite things, movies, a little bit of video game talk in here as well, a little bit of television, some Netflix, a whole bunch of stuff for us to go over. Now, I'm going to tell you how today's show is going to go. I'm going to start off today's show with 5 topics that you guys have submitted and emailed into me. Now, how do you get a topic or a question on the John Campea Show? It's real simple. You just email me anytime. Simply at john@thejohncampeashow.com. That's john@thejohncampeashow.com. Make sure you put that word topic in the subject line. I'm not kidding you guys. I've got like over 100 emails sitting in my inbox right now that don't have the word topic. I can't get to them if you don't put the word topic in the subject line. And also, guys, as always, keep your emails to 90 words or less, or else I wouldn't even be able to fit them on the screen, even if I wanted to use them. Now, after we get through those topics, we're going to go to your live questions, to take your questions live. And there are 2 ways to get live questions on the show. Way number 1 is to tweet to me. Simply load up Twitter and fire off a tweet to me at John Campea and fire in a question or comment. Another way to get a question on the live show is to use that super chat. If you're watching live, you see the super chat option. I will get through every super chat that gets put in there in the order that they get submitted. So, with all of that out of the way, let's dive into topic number 1. And topic number 1 today comes to us from Ethan Cannistra, who writes, "Hi, John. Love the show and watch every day." Well, thank you so much, Ethan. I really appreciate that. If Fox sells off their film division to a studio other than Disney, will the rights to Fantastic Four and all X-Men revert back to Marvel? I know that Fox cannot sell the rights to their Marvel characters to another studio. All right, guys, this is a really good question because it kind of goes back to a question that came in the other day, and the way I answered the question the other day could have given a misleading impression, because somebody was asking, hey, maybe should Fox sell off, like, maybe instead of selling off their entire film division, should they like sell off just like X-Men to one studio and maybe Fantastic Four to another, and then another movie property to another studio? And the way I answered it was probably the wrong way to answer it. Look, what I said as an answer was this. He goes, look, if you're Fox and you're looking to sell off your film division, you would rather sell it off to one buyer for one big price. That's the way you'd rather do it. Because if you sold off, say, X-Men and Fantastic Four, and then try to sell the rest of the studio, well, now the rest of the movie properties aren't worth as much because X-Men and Fantastic Four aren't there. And that's true. But the underlying truth to that is this, is that while Fox holds the film rights to Fantastic Four and X-Men, they can't transfer those film rights to another studio. They can't take those rights and then pass them off to, say, Sony or Universal or Lionsgate or whoever else you want to mention. They can't do that. It's either they have the rights or they got to revert the rights back to Disney. In that sense, Disney is the only serious player for acquiring like, say, the film division of Fox and acquiring a bunch of the whole television rights as well. Now, we heard the other day, I think it was Comcast, the Universal parent company, is also trying to enter into talks to acquire that stuff. But if they did acquire it, I believe that the rights to X-Men and Fantastic Four would then revert back to Marvel, I believe. Now, I put out an email last night to a contact of mine who works at the studios to hear what they have to say about that, but I haven't heard back from them on that point. But from what I understand, that if for whatever reason Fox does sell their movie division and they don't sell it to Disney, then the rights to Fantastic Four and X-Men would revert back to Marvel. That is my understanding. I'm waiting to hear back from, again, I'm waiting to hear back from the studio reps that I wrote to for confirmation of that, but that has always been my understanding. It has always been my understanding that Fox has the rights, but they can't just transfer those rights. In the same way that while Sony has the rights to Spider-Man, they never had the ability to just sell off the Spider-Man rights to, say, another studio. They either got to have it and they got to be making Spider-Man movies, or they got to send it back to Marvel. I believe the same thing is the situation for X-Men and Fantastic Four. And just going to bring attention to this, Ryan Butler put in a super chat. No comment. He just donated in the super chat. Thank you so much, Ryan, for helping to pay the bills around here and keep the lights on. I really appreciate that. All right, let's move on to question number 2. And question number 2 Comes to us from Scott Ellis. And Scott Ellis writes, with Coco winning the box office again, and I saw on Rotten Tomatoes that there are no big marketable movies coming out until Star Wars, that made me think of Netflix's Wright. With a reported $90 million budget and Will Smith as the star, could it have done well in theaters in early December before Star Wars comes out? Well, thanks a lot for the question, Scott. And there are a couple of interesting things there for us to consider. Number one is that once Justice League opened and Coco opened, there's like a couple of weeks where nothing major is opening in movie theaters between now and Star Wars The Last Jedi, which is really kind of weird. And actually, I went off on this yesterday, but it's got to be brought up again. Out of all the top 5 movies, only one approached a 60% drop, and that was Justice League. Why did none of the other ones really go past a 50% drop? Because nothing else opened in theaters. Nothing else opened. You look at the theaters this past weekend, no wide release films opened. So the top 5 at the box office this weekend were the exact same top 5 as last weekend. The big difference is Justice League dropped about 60%, and a lot of the other ones didn't even drop 50%. That's a horrible number for Justice League. Horrible. Nothing else opens, and you still took a 60% drop when the other films aren't even dropping 50%. That is terrible. Anyway, I could go on and on about the disaster that is Justice League for a long time. Anyway, and I'm sure we will continue to talk about it, I'm sure, in the weeks to come. However, it does bring up an interesting thought here, though, is that couldn't there be a really neat opportunity here for Netflix to take this movie Bright that looks pretty good? I don't think it looks spectacular, but I think the trailers look interesting. I'm interested to watch it. Because not only do you have, Will Smith, you got Joel Edgerton in there, who I think is, well, he's the best actor in that movie. I think Joel Edgerton that's not a diss on Will Smith at all. I think he's a great actor. I just think Joel Edgerton is one of the more underrated actors in the business today. So you've got 2 great actors in it. You got an interesting story. Yeah, it's a little bit of an Alien Nation ripoff, but whatever. Okay, that's fine. All great art is a derivative of some other piece of art. So there you go. And I think it looks interesting, and it's certainly and you got David Ayer directing it. Could there have been an opportunity for them to actually put this movie in theaters and at this period of time right now and reap some financial reward before Star Wars The Last Jedi comes out? I think there would have been an opportunity for that, yes. However, you have to understand Netflix's overall strategy here. Netflix is trying to make itself a legitimate player in the motion picture game, but not motion pictures that go into theaters. They're trying to make themselves a major player in major films that play on their service. They're trying to become that type of a disruptive presence in the industry. And if that's what you're trying to do, then the moment you come up with a real big potential hit, you can't then just change your philosophy then and put it in movie theaters. You can't do that. You've got to follow through with your strategy. And this could work. It could backfire on the one. Look, the majority of the original films that Netflix has put up on their streaming service have been absolute garbage. There have been a couple of diamonds in the rough, but for the most part, it's been absolute gibberish garbage. And so when I heard that they were lining up to do 40, 50, 60 films a year, it's okay, that's great unless they continue to be 95% garbage. I mean, I think I'd rather Netflix just make maybe 15 original films a year and make them really good, but whatever, they're going to take a swing at the bat. Let's see how they can do. But if that is their philosophy, and they're trying to establish themselves as a major player in the motion picture game, then when you come up with a potentially big film like this, follow through with it. Put it up on your streaming service and see what kind of reception that it gets, see what kind of impact it has in helping your company reach its goal. So could there have been an opportunity to put it in theaters and do some damage? Yeah, I think there was an opportunity to do that, but I think the wiser thing for them to do right now, since they have a film that looks pretty good, marquee director, 2 marquee stars, pretty good looking story, go through with it and put it on your streaming service and see what happens. I mean, look, Disney's going to start doing that pretty soon too with their streaming service. So let's see how this all plays out. It's going to be quite interesting. I mean, but then again, it could backfire on them and be another piece of garbage original film, but we'll have to wait and see. All right, let's move on now to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Samuel Polay, who writes, in looking at the upcoming films that are also trying to gain awards consideration, and just how crowded this year has been for good movies, I find myself worried that Logan may get shafted by the Academy. All three leads deserve acting nods, especially Patrick Stewart, but this film truly deserves a Best Picture nomination, if not a win, and I fear it may not even get close. Well, thanks a lot for the question, man. And look, Samuel, you guys have been hearing me say for a long time, Logan is flat out, no questions asked. All film is subjective, and you can have a different opinion, and that's fine. But to me, it's not even close. Like, nothing remotely in the comic book genre this year came within a whiff of Logan. Logan is so 5 miles ahead of everything else, it's hilarious. And there have been some really good comic book movies this year. You're talking about Spider-Man Homecoming, you're talking about Wonder Woman, you're talking about Thor Ragnarok. I mean, there have been some really, really good ones this year, but none of them come within whiffing distance of Logan. Logan is so head and shoulders above all the rest of them, it's not even a competition. And up until yesterday, Logan was not only, to me, the #1 comic book movie of the year, Logan was the best movie of the year. Until yesterday. I will put up my review for Darkest Hour a little bit later today, but the fact that I just said, until yesterday, Logan was my #1 movie of the year. And now I'm telling you that a little bit later I'm putting up my review for Darkest Hour, which I saw yesterday. That should tell you a little bit something about what I think about Darkest Hour. But my review for that comes up a little bit later today. But Logan is just such a magnificent film. But look, this is the trickiness of the Oscars. It's not about, and look, I mention this all the time, it's not just about, are you good? Is your film good? It's not about that. It's not about, do you deserve a nomination? It's not about that. It's about, do you deserve it in the light of all the other deserving nominees? Because, look, man, this year, 2017, has been nothing short of a spectacular year for some damn good movies. Damn good movies. You're talking Baby Driver, The Big Sick, Wind River, Battle of the Sexes, I thought was magnificent. Now you're talking things like The Post is coming out. Now you're talking about movies like, oh, what did I just see the other day? And I'm told the Disaster Artist. Now you're talking about Darkest Hour. I mean, I can list off the top of my head 15 films that deserve Best Picture nominations. The problem is we don't live in an era where we can have 15 nominees. We're going to have 9, probably. Maybe even 8. At the very most, they're allowed to have 10, but the way the system works will probably end up being 9 or 8 or something like that. That means there are going to be deserving films that don't get nominations. That's just the way it is. That's why Oscars are so incredibly tough to win. And some of the performances we've been seeing this year are crazy. Like, I'm not so sure that Hugh Jackman is a shoo-in at all. I wouldn't even say he would be a shoo-in to be in my top 5 best lead actor performances. Okay, and you know I loved Hugh Jackman in Logan, but I'm not so sure he's going to end up in my top 5. I'm not so sure that, I mean, Logan, the movie, is going to end up in my top 10 of the year, no doubt about it. It's probably going to end up in my top 5. But there are so many great films this year, it's not inexplicable that Logan may not get one of those nominee spots. It's not inexplicable. And if you watch all these movies, you'll totally see what I'm talking about. Because there are some absolute magnificent films this year. Look, I'm so confident in the caliber of movies we've had this year that if Logan does not get a nomination for Best Picture, I'm not going to call it a snub. It would have been in my nominee list, yes. But there are so many damn good movies this year, I find it impossible that in the event that the Academy Award nominations get announced and Logan is not nominated for Best Picture, I can't call it a snub. Because you can only call it a snub if it's just inexcusable that it's not there. Well, there's enough really great movies out this year that it is excusable that it's not up there. So that's just kind of how I feel. But the one I feel most passionately about, though, is Patrick Stewart for Best Supporting Actor. That's the one I feel most passionately about. I love Logan overall. I love Hugh Jackman in it. I love Daphne Keane. The role, I mean, Daphne Keane, you could make an argument that Daphne Keane may end up getting a Best Supporting Actress nomination for what she did. Because every once in a while, the Academy likes putting in a child actor there, and this would be a great excuse for them to do it. But the one I personally feel most passionately about is the Patrick Stewart role. I think it's the best performance he's ever given in his life. I think it's one of the best performances of the year. Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to get a nomination, but that is the one I will feel that pang of disappointment if on the morning they announce the Academy Award nominees, if they don't have Patrick Stewart on, that's the one that's going to hurt. That's the one that's going to hit me right here. That's the one that's going to get me, is if Patrick Stewart is not in there. Hey guys, I noticed a whole bunch of you putting in super chats. Thank you so much. I will get to the super chats in the order that they come into when we get to the live question part of the show, but feel free to send them in now. They will be on my list, and I will get to them as we get to the live question part of the show. All right, let's move on now to the next question. And the next question comes to us today from Mr. Zachary Shaw. And Zachary Shaw writes, "Hey John, question. Paul Rudd recently came out and said that Ant-Man and the Wasp will be a romantic comedy superhero film. What do you think of this? Do you think this is a correct direction Marvel should go with this film? Also, is there a chance that this film won't be as well received since Edgar Wright isn't involved in any capacity?" Well, thanks a lot for the question, man. Let's address the second part of your question first, though, about Edgar Wright. And everybody knows I am a huge Edgar Wright fan. I love Edgar Wright. I've had multiple opportunities to get together and chat with him. I've done Q&As with him. He's been on panels of mine. I'm just a huge fan of Edgar Wright. Love the guy. And I love what he brings to the table. But I'm one of those guys, if you remember all the way back in the AMC days, that I said, look, this separation of Edgar Wright and Marvel over Ant-Man is understandable. When Edgar Wright wrote his Ant-Man movie, there wasn't an MCU. And now there is an MCU, so the realities of Ant-Man have to change. Edgar didn't want to change his vision, which is totally understandable. Marvel felt they had to change the vision, which is totally understandable. And they parted ways amicably. I remember James Gunn put up a great post on Twitter talking about it, saying, hey, you know what? Sometimes there are two really good people, and you realize in a relationship they just don't work, and it's just healthiest for both of them just to part ways. And I think James Gunn was completely accurate about that when talking about this situation. And by the way, we may see Edgar Wright direct an MCU film at some point. Absolutely we could, because I think the relationship's still good. And you notice if you saw Ant-Man, Edgar Wright's name is still all over the credits. They listed him as one of the writers. They listed him as a producer. They did a whole bunch of stuff. They gave a lot of credit to Edgar Wright. That being said, I give a lot of credit to Marvel and the team they had involved, the new director they brought and all that kind of stuff, for how Ant-Man turned out. I thought Ant-Man was a hell of a lot of fun. I love that movie. Absolutely adore that movie. You know, it made over $500 million at the box office on a $130 million budget. I mean, primo. It was great. I mean, who would have ever thought we'd make an Ant-Man movie, for heaven's sakes, let alone a successful one? Anyway, with that removed, people really loved that movie. And now that they got the sequel coming out, yes, Edgar's not involved, but I really don't think that's going to affect the film at all. I think it's going to be perfectly fine. And as far as the notion about them making a romantic comedy, we've been seeing Marvel more and more making subgenres out of their individual films. Winter Soldier was like a political thriller. Ant-Man was like a heist film. I mean, they've been trying these different things with their subgenres of their films. For them to go out and do a full-blown romantic comedy, look, you've got a lead like Paul Rudd. Why not? You be playing to the strengths of the performers you have in there. So it seems to me like that would be a great thing to do. So I applaud Marvel for continuing to explore the various subgenres. Exploring heists, exploring, political thrillers, exploring romantic comedies. Yeah, explore all those things, man. It's what keeps the genre fresh. And with a lead like Paul Rudd, I mean, you're playing to your talent's strengths, so I think it's a great move. I think it's a fantastic move, actually. So they'll still make it fun, and they'll still make it exciting, and it'll have a lot of action. Those are hallmarks of a Marvel film. Those will all be there too, but we're also going to put in a strong sense of romantic comedy. I think it's great. I really do. So I'm looking forward to it. I think they're going to do great things with that thing. All right, let's move on now to the final emailed in question today before we go over to the live questions. And the final emailed in question today comes to us from Jenna Sung, who writes, "Hi, John. Love your shows." Well, thank you so much, Jenna. I appreciate that. My question is about The Last Jedi and Battlefront 2. I'm a big Star Wars fan and gaming fan. I got Battlefront 2 and have been totally turned off by their pay-to-win philosophy, locked characters, and seemingly disdain for the consumer. It's left me feeling less excited for The Last Jedi, to be honest. Could this be a big problem for the movie when it comes out? Well, thanks a lot for the question, Jenna. And this has been a topic for a number of weeks that has been ripping around on YouTube and in the various chat forums and things like that. Now, for those of you who know, I tried the first Battlefront, was not impressed with it. I just didn't think it was all that good. And apparently a lot of people felt the same. I didn't think it was terrible, and it wasn't evil. They didn't do anything wrong. It's just, I didn't find it to be all that interesting of a game, nor all that compelling of a game. Now, and for the most part, I don't do a lot of console gaming. Most of my gaming is like PC-based, or I'm a big mobile game guy. I like a lot of mobile games. So that's generally where I lie. But I have been excited about Battlefront 2. Now, I didn't get around to getting Battlefront 2 the day it got released because Justice League had just dropped, Punisher was opening on the same day, so I kind of put it off. Then I got kind of busy, I put it off a little bit more, and I said, okay, now I'm going to get it, now I'm going to get it. But then I started hearing about all these people complaining about Battlefront 2. And we'll talk about how this ties into The Last Jedi in just a second here. So one of the things that I was really excited about was the fact that Battlefront 2 had a single-player campaign. It's like, thank God, because I'll be honest with you. I mentioned this on the show the other day. When it comes to my gaming, I really prefer just playing single player, doing my own thing. Even when I played World of Warcraft, and I spent a lot of hours of my life playing World of Warcraft, I never joined any guilds. I never joined any parties. I never went on instances. I just liked playing the single player experience. That's how I enjoy playing games. And that's cool. That probably most of you feel much differently than me, and that's totally fine. That's just the way I like to play the games. So that's fine. Anyway, so the fact that they introduced a single-player campaign, which I would never buy a game if it didn't, I thought that was great. But then I started hearing, John, you might want to hold off on getting that game. You could probably get through this game in about 3.5 to 4 hours. I'm like, what? Seriously? And then I started reading around. It's like, yep, most people saying if you just sat down, you could finish the single-player campaign in one sit-down session. That turned me off. That turned me off huge. And then I thought, well, maybe the story is worth it. Now, for me, I like going onto YouTube and watching the cutscene movies of games, and because if I like them, then I just run out and buy the game so I can play the story out, and that's great. I sat down and watched the cutscene movie of Battlefront 2, Inferno Squad, and I gotta tell you, I thought it was piss poor. I thought it was piss poor. I was not impressed with the story at all. Like, to me, it was very fragmented. Like, you sit down and you watch the cutscene movie of Last of Us, you feel like you're watching a motion picture. And the way the story beautifully flows, and then they work the action around the story. I mean, that was great. Same with Injustice Gods Among Us. Like, the cutscene movie of that is awesome. Fantastic. It's a viewing experience. It made me rush out and buy the game and play the game because I love the story so much. Watching the first player campaign story of Battlefront 2 turned me off completely. It was just like a fragmented, jagged thing where they threw in a couple of little things, pointless cameos by Luke Skywalker, pointless cameos by Lando, really, that didn't have to be them. It could have been any character whatsoever. It felt like a waste of time. So the fact that I thought the story was bad, combined with the fact that everybody's telling me I could finish the whole thing in 4 hours, turned me off. But then came all the complaints about the multiplayer thing, where it's really like, hey, look, it's... you pay $60 for this game. You would think, crazy us. If I drop $60 for the game, you give me a complete game and everything I need to play the game to its fullest enjoyment. But nope, that's not the gaming industry anymore. Now the gaming industry is you pay $60 so you can have the privilege to pay more money to get things you need in the game. If you really want to play the game the way you want to, you got to pay more money. So there's these loot boxes in the game where you can't even just pick what you want. You can buy them with real money. You can get them through grinding, but it takes an awful long time to do it. The whole game is basically set up in such a way to encourage you to drop real money to get these add-ons and these bonuses and these advantages. So ultimately, the big complaint I've been seeing from most of the gaming community has been, if you get two players of equal skill, the player who spent the most money is the one who's going to win. And really, everything I've researched, and I've read counter arguments to it, but that really is what it comes down to. They have set up a system and a game that all it is about is just about encouraging the players to spend more money, buy more things in the game. And if you spend more money than the other guy, you're going to have an advantage in the game over the other guy. I'm like, what kind of stupid system is this? Now, I'm not a hardcore gamer. So, I mean, I'm hearing the frustration of those who are hardcore gamers, and I'm completely empathizing with them. That is fucking ridiculous. So I'm not going to buy this game. I have zero interest now in buying this game. And I hope nobody buys this game. Now, you could say, but John, you play a lot of mobile games. Like, a lot of mobile games have that freemium kind of model where you do in-app purchases. Yes, that's true, but there's two big differences. The first big difference for me personally is I used to download and play like every mobile game I could get my hand on. Like, you can ask Ann. The first thing I do when I go to bed at night, I lay down in bed, pull out my tablet, play some mobile gaming for a little bit before I go to sleep. But it's made me be more choosy about which mobile games I play. Okay, the fact that every game now seems to be about in-app purchases. So it's made me really choosy about which games I play. I still play games that have in-app purchases, but I'm just more choosy. The second big difference is I don't have to pay $60 to download that game first. It's free. I get the game for free, and I can just play the base game for free. And then if I choose to buy add-ons, I can do that. That's fine. That is a big difference from them asking you to drop $60 to buy their game and not actually give you the game. All they've given you is the privilege of paying us more money. You want to pay us more money? First, you have to pay us $60. Oh, now that you've given us $60, you think we're going to give you the complete game? What kind of silliness is that? No, no, no. We've just sold you the privilege of giving us more money. And if you want to have a chance playing in these multiplayer campaigns or these multiplayer events, you better pay us money because they're paying money and they're getting all the advantages that come along with it. It's a terrible system. It's terrible. So I'll never buy another game from EA. I'll just tell you that right now. I will never buy another game from EA. But now, getting back to how does this tie into The Last Jedi? Well, even before this email I got from Jenna, I've heard some people mention that this experience, even though it has nothing to do with Lucasfilm, this is EA, the experience is turning them off. And now some people are saying they're feeling less excited about The Last Jedi just because they're having a negative experience with a Star Wars product, or at least a product that has the Star Wars label on it. They're saying, I'm having a negative experience, and I don't know if I'm as excited about seeing The Last Jedi anymore. Jenna expressed that perfectly. Here's what I think. I think for the most part, the vast, vast majority of people, I think we do have a big separation in our heads between the game and the movies. We've seen bad Star Wars games before, and it's never hurt our experience with the movies. Battlefront is a great example. I thought Battlefront was a meh game, but it never hurt my enthusiasm for the movie. Now, there's some underhanded stuff going on here with EA and the way they're trying to capitalize and really victimize and take advantage of and essentially financially molest their customers. And that's rotten. But I think most people still have that dividing line in their head. They understand there's a difference between the game and the game industry and the movie itself. And those who are having that line blurred, I think for the most part, it's not really killing Star Wars for most people. I think just like you said, Jenna, maybe momentarily it might hurt your enthusiasm momentarily. But I think as the movie comes out, if you're a Star Wars fan, you're going to be there with bells on, so will I, and we'll forget all about the bad experience with Battlefront 2. So that's the way I think most people are probably going to approach it. I could be wrong about that. I'm sure you guys probably have a lot of very passionate, because I know a lot of you guys are big gaming fans. I'm sure you have some big opinions about this. Jump down to the comment section, leave your thoughts. I really do want to know what you guys have to think about this. Okay, guys, with that out of the way now, we're going to get ourselves ready here to go to the live questions. Again, there are two ways you can get a live question on. Number one, just tweet to me. Simply hop on Twitter, fire it up, and tweet to me at John Campea. I'll get through as many tweets as I can. But also, you can use this, if you're watching live, you can use the super chat function in the chat board, and we'll get to every single one that gets put in there as well. Now, before we get to that, though, it is that time of the show for me to do my daily 1-minute commercial break for my shameless plug of the thing that keeps the lights on around here, which is my Patreon campaign. So here, check this out, and we'll be back in just 1 minute. For those of you who have followed me for any period of time, you guys know that I made the decision recently to leave the corporate overlords. I no longer wanted to work for corporations. I wanted to be an independent content creator. And the only way I've been able to do that is by the support of my Patreon supporters. So what I would like to do is to ask you guys who watch my shows, who spend any amount of time with me every single month, to consider going over to www.patreon.com/John Campea. There you'll get all the information about what exactly does it mean to be a Patreon supporter of mine. What does being a Patreon supporter do for helping to make sure that shows like this one and all the other shows I do here on my channel can actually be produced? And on top of that, what benefits are there to being a Patreon supporter? And maybe if you guys can check that out, if you decide you want to be one of my Patreon supporters, that would be awesome. And if you don't, that's perfectly fine too. I'm just happy that you guys have decided to be here today and be a fellow movie fan and join us in the conversation. So go and check out the website, see if you want to become a Patreon supporter. And now let's get back. All right, guys, and a big thank you to all of you who are already Patreon supporters of mine. You guys do make this thing happen. You know, a couple advantages I want to mention. People have been asking me about audio podcasts. The audio podcast versions of these shows are available to our Patreon supporters. And today, starting today, we're going to be doing a test run that there is going to be a John Campea after show on the Patreon supporters Facebook group that we're going to be doing after this show is done, just to dig a little bit deeper into the issues we've already discussed. Those are just some of the advantages for Patreon supporters. So thank you so much to everybody who is a Patreon supporter. All right. Now, with that out of the way, let's get to the live questions. And we're going to start off over on the super chat people. Ryan Butler again sent in a super chat. So did Punisher 20,001. Just sent in a great super chat. Thanks so much. I am Hishcam Khan wrote in, "Hey John, big fan of you and I watch your show every day." Thank you so much. I am. You're welcome. I have a question. If I make my own movie and upload it on YouTube, so will you review it? Thanks and keep up the great work. Well, thank you so much for the question. Thank you for the super chat. I can tell you that I will not review it. I will probably not review it. I generally review movies that a majority of my audience will either have the opportunity to see or are interested in seeing in, because there's really not a point in me in reviewing a lot of movies that nobody's going to watch my review for. So, and I don't specialize in small independent production. That's not what my specialty is. My specialty is the wider, broad-based, wide release market. I do talk about indie films now and again, absolutely, especially the ones that impress me. But for the most part, I keep my focus there. But thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate that. All right, let's see. CF Frank wrote in, thoughts on Chicago from writer of The Greatest Showman. I quite like Chicago. Like, I wouldn't have given it the Academy Award that year. And it is not my favorite musical. My favorite musical on screen, at any rate, is still probably Moulin Rouge. I love Moulin Rouge. But I like Chicago quite a bit. And I cannot even begin to tell you how excited I am about The Greatest Showman. And you guys have heard me talk about how excited I am for that movie. I think the trailers have just been balls. Total balls. They've been so good. Cannot wait to see this movie. So that's my thoughts on that. HPFRK sent in a $2 super chat. Thank you so much. Punisher sent in another $5 one. Thank you so much, Punisher. Maximus1041 writes in, keep up the great work, Senor Campea. Thank you so much, Max. I appreciate it. I've been mentioning that on the show, too. A lot of people see me as John Campea, the titan of industry, the man. But really, I'm an insecure, fragile little soul. So hearing nice things from you guys actually means an awful lot to me. It hits me right here. Thank you so much for that. Louis Cardenas writes in, hey John, big fan since the AMC days. Those were good days, weren't they, those AMC days? The Last Jedi is plural. Got the chance to see the trailer in Mexico. Big changes coming in the franchise. Okay, that is a common misconception. When the title The Last Jedi came out, everybody started talking about how in this language and in that language, the Jedi, it's actually plural. However, Rian Johnson, about 3 months ago, maybe, came out and said, no, there's nothing tricky like that. It's meant as The Last Jedi, as in the beginning of Star Wars The Force Awakens. It's the exact same wording as they used in The Force Awakens when it said Luke Skywalker, the Last Jedi, has vanished, right? When it used that terminology in The Force Awakens, Rian Johnson clarified that it's still the exact same situation as that. So while it may read in certain languages as plural, that wasn't their intention. So Rian Johnson kind of clarified that. But, I mean, it's still fun for us to speculate and think about. All right, next one comes to us from Alan Gonzalez Cordova, who writes, what do you think about Kylo and Rey and Rey being brothers. Well, I think, well, since Rey is a girl, I thought you meant being brother and sister. I do not think they are brother and sister. I do not think Rey is a Skywalker. Again, I could be wrong about that, but I believe everything in The Force Awakens clearly shows that she is not a Skywalker. I believe all the evidence points to her not being a Skywalker. Could be wrong. Maybe she is, and that'll surprise me when I watch the movie. This Saturday, I'm seeing The Last Jedi this Saturday. I'm so freaking excited. Anyway, it was funny because Dennis Zen was over here. Dennis Zen was here at my place on Saturday night, 2 nights ago, and because we were watching UFC together. And we start talking about the premiere and, you know, are we doing this? Or which limo are we going to take? Are we, like, we just go balls out for these things. It's just Saturday I finally get to see this movie. But I do not think they are brother and sister. Let's see. Oz Kabat writes, any game developers you'd like to see a biopic on? My personal pick is id Software. Doom and Quake? Not really. I mean, if anything, I'd really like to see an iconic thing about, like, how Nintendo became... You know, Nintendo became a powerhouse in pop culture. So maybe that would be interesting to me. Other than that, I got to admit, off the top of my head, can't really think of any that really stand out to me as, oh, I'd love to see a biopic about these guys. You know what I'm saying? Okay, thanks a lot, Oskabat. The next one comes to us from N. Starks 007, who writes, is the lack of leadership at Warner Brothers the reason for huge budgets? Tarzan, / Arthur, 175 million plus. How do films like Shape of Water look better for 1/8 of the price? It's a good question. And look, it's not just a Warner Brothers thing. This is an industry-wide problem. Studios spending too much money on producing their movies, which eventually gets passed on to you and me in the ticket price. This is an industry-wide problem that needs to be addressed. Let's not pretend this is just a Warner Brothers issue. It is not just a Warner Brothers issue. This is an everybody issue, including Disney and Marvel and Universal and Paramount. And I mean, everybody's spending too much money on these things. They're just throwing around because they think, no big deal. We'll just make the theaters increase ticket prices and we'll recoup the money that way. It's just a bad way of doing business. So I hope they change that. But again, I do not think it is a Warner Brothers problem. It is an industry-wide problem, in my opinion. Thanks a lot for the question, N. Stark 007. Next one, HPFRK writes, have you ever had your opinion on a movie changed by watching / listening to a review of it? Big fan of yours since the early AMC days. I've certainly had my opinion on elements of movies change. Not so much from reading a review, but more from conversations I either have with friends or fellow fans online, things like that. Like people will bring up a really good point about something. I go, oh, yeah, I didn't think about it that way. And it might change my mind on elements of a film. I've never hated a movie and then somebody bring up one point and then all of a sudden magically, like one point changes me from hating a movie to loving a movie, or one point changes me from loving a movie to hating a movie. That doesn't and shouldn't happen. But I've certainly had elements of a film that I've had an opinion on been changed because that's what being a fan is. And that's what having an open mind is having your opinions and being strong about them. But when you get introduced to new ideas or new information, be willing to change your opinion. If new ideas and new information come along that shed different light on the issue, then yeah, change your mind. I think that's the way a healthy film fan should operate. But thanks a lot for the question. All right. Last super chat question we have coming here from Jake C., who wrote, Batman Forever 1995 or Suicide Squad? I go Suicide Squad. Look, I am unapologetic. I like Suicide Squad. I like the movie. Was it a hot mess? Yes. Do I think it had clearly had some issues? Absolutely. Would I argue with somebody who hated it? Absolutely not. I get it. I get where people who hated that movie are coming from. I totally do. All I'm telling you is that, hey, I had fun. I had fun. And at the end of the day, the positive, entertaining, fun aspects of the film for me outweighed all the negative stuff. And there's a lot of negative stuff there. So if you put it to me asking me Batman Forever or Suicide Squad, I'm going to go with me some Suicide Squad. All right, thanks a lot for the question. Let's jump over to Twitter now. Let's take some of the live tweets that you guys are sending in. And the first live tweet comes to us from Namak17, who writes, John, is Justice League on course to lose WB money or not? It might be. I still believe it will break even or make them a little bit of money. like I put up a report yesterday that originally from Forbes, but really if you look at the trajectory, it looks like the movie is not going to cross $700 million worldwide. It looks like it ain't going to cross 700 million worldwide. It may not even make as much. I think Doctor Strange made like 678 million. Imagine that. Justice League might not make as much money as Doctor Strange. Think about that for a minute. But if it does get into that $675 to $700 million range, I believe it breaks even. If it can crawl over that $700 million mark, it'll absolutely then be in the black. It'll be in the little bit of profit margin. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, Justice League is not a movie that was put together and constructed and brainchild to be a movie that broke even. It was constructed to be a $2 billion movie. It was constructed to be the movie that could go head-to-head and toe-to-toe with Marvel's The Avengers. And instead, Marvel is kicking its ass all over the place. Marvel has so throttled DC and so outclassed them. I like every single DC movie we've had so far, and even I'm saying that. They have just completely throttled and outclassed them on every level. So, I mean, the audience is more behind Marvel. The critics are certainly far more behind Marvel. And now when they put Justice League out, we've seen that the fans have abandoned the DCEU so much that the damn movie doesn't even open to more than $100 million. It's laughable. Laughable. So anyway, that's just kind of my thought on that. All right, let's see. This one comes to us from Sha'aran R.O.A., who writes, John, if the theater's take is 1/3 of the movie revenue, even if a movie breaks even, does it still lose money? No, when I say break even, I'm taking into consideration. When I say if Justice League passes like $670 million, that's taking into consideration theaters keeping its cut. Because remember, the cost of Justice League is around $450 million. $300 million production budget, $150 million for marketing. So that's $450. So if it makes about 675 and you take away about 1/3, you're going to come in around that break-even point. So I'm taking that in consideration already. But it's a very observant thing for you to ask. All right, next tweet comes to us from Trevor Valentine, who writes, John, which movie will be more financially successful? Avengers Infinity War or Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom? I really believe Avengers Infinity War. I think Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom is going to be very successful. I think it's going to make a lot of money. I think it's going to be a fun film. But I do not believe it's going to straight up repeat the success of the first Jurassic World movie. I don't think it's going to repeat that success because it wasn't overwhelmingly beloved. Like, a lot of people like Jurassic World, but there weren't a lot of people out there that overwhelmingly loved Jurassic World. You know what I'm talking about? So because of that, I think it's going to be real successful, but I don't think it's going to equal what the first one did. Avengers Infinity War, I think easily will be the winner out of those two. But, like as in everything else, we're just going to have to wait and see. Remember, I'm the idiot who said for a year that Justice League is going to break $1 billion easy. What the hell do I know? So there's that, of course. All right, a few more Super Chats have come in. Let's head on over to the Super Chats for a second. And over on the Super Chats, we've got Virgil Hawkins, who wrote in, hey, John, when will we get a big budget Dragon Ball Z movie after that disaster Dragon Ball Evolution? Never. It's never going to happen. A big budget one? Never. Because why would a studio sink big dollars? Why would a studio sink $180 million into a Dragon Ball Z movie? Like when they saw a Dragon Ball Z movie come out and tank, then you roughly the right demographic in a Power Rangers movie come out. Nobody went to go see it. I mean, obviously people went to go see it, but it didn't make any kind of a splash at the box office whatsoever. So if you're a studio head, why would you suddenly magically go, oh, no, it'll make $600 million if we put that out? No, it won't. It won't. I'm not saying they shouldn't make one. I'm just saying I don't think there's any chance that any studio is going to step up and put up $150, $160, $180 million budget plus the huge marketing campaign, and put themselves in a position where their movie needs to make $600 million just to break even. It ain't going to happen. Now, maybe we'll see a studio step up and make a mid-budget film, like a $70 million film, something like that. That could happen. That's possible. But right now, all the evidence that studio execs have in front of them, we did a Dragon Ball Z movie, didn't do well. Power Rangers just came out, did not do well. Roughly the right demographic. Obviously, there are differences. I'm just saying in the right ballpark. And people didn't support it. We have no empirical evidence in front of us. If you're a studio executive, you got to be honest with yourself and say, we have no empirical, factual data in front of us to suggest that if we make this movie, it will make big box office. But we do have evidence to suggest that it won't. So that's going to come into play here. So I wouldn't hold my breath for a big budget, true Hollywood blockbuster Dragon Ball Z movie anytime soon. That's just whether it deserves one or not is a totally separate question. But whether it will happen or not, which is what you're asking me, I really don't think it's going to happen. And I, again, could be wrong about that. All right, next one comes to us from Tristan Brown, who writes, congrats on your success. Thank you so much, Tristan. Studios struggle to market black actors to international audiences. How will Black Panther perform internationally? That's a great question. It really is. Now, I had somebody write to me a question the other day that I chose not to use. Not because it was a bad question. I just didn't know how to properly handle the question. And it was somewhere along the lines of, hey, a lot of racists in the world. How do you think Black Panther is going to do? And I didn't know how to, tactfully handle that question. So I decided not to use it. But it is bringing it up. Has there been some struggles with Hollywood movies that feature black leads, marketing those movies overseas a little bit? There have been some issues, but I don't think enough empirical evidence to say it's a across-the-board rule, right? I am sensing a lot of excitement for Black Panther. Now, I don't think Black Panther is going to crack $1 billion, but neither did Thor Ragnarok. And Thor Ragnarok is a huge success. It just crossed $820 million worldwide. I think Black Panther is going to come in around the $700 million range. Considering the budget for the movie, that's going to be a great number for it. That's going to be very successful. I think it's going to do just fine. I really do, because I'm sensing a lot of excitement. And I'm only speaking from my limited point of view, but from my limited point of view, I have a lot of international friends that watch this show. I have a lot of international people who watch this show, and I'm hearing nothing but excitement from them. So I think Black Panther is going to do just fine. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe it'll play out differently, but I think it's going to be a big smash hit for them because I'm sensing nothing but big excitement. Anyway, thanks a lot for the question. This next one comes in from Anthony R. And Anthony R. writes, do you think that the Marvel versus DC fanboy war stems from the movies, or is it deeper? People have told me they like Marvel more because it's more realistic and DC is too godlike. I think it's rooted in the comic books. I think this whole ridiculous DC versus Marvel thing, look, if you're a comic book movie fan, you like both. And if you don't like one over the other, it's because the movies haven't worked for you, not because you have an inbred dogma that I must hate everything DC, I must hate everything Marvel. That ridiculous, childish mentality, it seems to stem from, and not because of comic books, but that's where it seems to come from, because for ages you've had these two major brands of comic books, Marvel and DC, and you have people, it's the same thing as Apple and Windows. It's the same thing as, Ford or Chevy. It's, people like to draw lines in the sand and join tribes, when really a tribe does nothing for you whatsoever. But that's what humans like to do. I do it. I'm sure you do it. And I hate that I do it. And I hate that you do it. But it is what a lot of us do. We draw lines in sands and join little tribes. And we define our tribes by the fact that we hate the other tribe. And which is kind of a sad state of affairs. And it's kind of pathetic and it's kind of useless. But hey, man, it is what it is. All right, let's go back over to the Twitter board here. And this next tweet we've got comes to us from Rome 10/21/45/83 writes, John, do you think Jumanji opening so close to Star Wars will hurt the box office of either film? I don't think so. It's 2 weeks removed. I think a lot of people, and it's the Christmas season when a lot of people are going to go see a lot of movies. I think Jumanji is going to have a strong opening in the $40 to $50 million range. Opening is going to be very strong. I think Star Wars The Last Jedi, if it deserves it, and if it's as good as we hope it is, I think Star Wars The Last Jedi is going to have some very strong legs and hold out and do very, very well. So I don't think they're worried about that at all. I think Jumanji is going to do just fine too. I think there's enough business to go around during the Christmas season that both films will be totally fine. I really think so. Let's see. This next one comes to us from MSWORD13 writes, John, is Fox even making an awards campaign push for Logan? Yes, they are. I've seen the ads myself. I've seen the for-your consideration ads for the Logan stuff myself. So yes, they are doing a push for it. This next one comes to us from Dune04 writes, John, will they fix up the CGI Superman mouth for the Justice League Blu-ray? No, we've addressed this a couple of times already. This movie, we're not even sure if it's going to break even. What Warner Brothers is probably not going to do, I think there's going to be a lot of bonus features on this disc. I think there's going to be a lot of deleted scenes included on the disc. I think they're going to put a lot of stuff on the disc, but they're not going to put a lot of more money into it. I don't think we're going to see, a lot of people have been asking, do you think they'll fix up all the CGI? No, because they're not going to drop another $50 million on something that may already be losing the money. They're not going to drop an additional $50 million to do that. I think they're going to pack this Blu-ray with lots of special features, but I don't think any of them are going to be holistic, reduxes of the bad visual effects in the film. I don't think that's something that they're probably going to do. All right, I'm going to take just a couple of more here right now, and then we're going to call it a day. This next one comes to us from Paul X157, writes, John, Warner Brothers needs to make a marketing course from the people at Deadpool. Well, remember, every movie, you can't market The Greatest Showman the same way you marketed Deadpool. You can't market The Darkest Hours the same way you marketed Deadpool. Deadpool was a very unique film that had to be marketed in a very unique way, and they did a gangbusters job with it. They did such a great job for it. But honestly, there's no lessons to be learned from that marketing campaign for Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep's The Post. There's no marketing lesson to be learned from Deadpool that can be transferred over to The Post. You know what I'm saying? It was a very unique film with a very unique situation. And that's the thing about marketing. It's such an art because each film needs to be marketed so uniquely to play up to that film's strength. So that's something that's got to be kept in mind as well. All right. Final question of the day, guys. This one comes to us from Abdullah JR00, who writes, John, in your opinion, what is the greatest trilogy of all time and why? For me, it's Lord of the Rings, no doubt. Oh, it's no question. It's the original Star Wars trilogy. No film in history, no set of films in history have had that kind of an impact on pop culture. We see the enduring popularity of it today. It is by far the greatest trilogy ever made. Lord of the Rings, close second. I mean, it's a good second place. Absolutely, I love the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The final film, Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, no film in history has ever won more Oscars at the Academy Awards than Lord of the Rings: Return of the King did. It won 11. And it's the only, and it was won for every category it was nominated for. It was nominated in 11 categories and it swept. 11 wins. No film in history has ever won more than Lord of the Rings: Return of the King did. There were two that won as many, but none of them had clean sweeps the way this one did. I mean, it was just amazing. So I love the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But then you got to bring in, obviously, the Godfather trilogy. 2 of the films in the trilogy won Best Picture. All 3 of them were nominated for Best Picture. And 2 of them won. Star Wars can't say that. Lord of the Rings can't say that. So that's got to be heavily considered. You're looking at the Toy Story trilogy. I mean, the lowest rated one on Rotten Tomatoes, I think, is 99%. I think 2 of them hold 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. That's got to be considered in there somewhere. I mean, there's a lot of great trilogies, but to me, there's no question it's Star Wars. Star Wars is the greatest trilogy of all time. Again, just in my personal, humble opinion. All right, guys, that will do it for today's installment of the John Campea Show. Thank you guys so much for making this a fun day. I've really enjoyed this. I hope you did too. Don't forget, I'll be back again tomorrow. All this week, we're doing the show. We're testing out a new start time. 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you guys will come back and join me again. If you like this video, click the thumbs up. Leave your thoughts and opinions down below. Make sure you're following me on social media. Right there you see simply @JohnCampea. That'll do it for me, guys. Thanks so much for joining me. My name's John Campea, and until the next episode, bye-bye.